All right, so we're going to talk about phylogeny. So, phylogeny is a way to show evolutionary history, and it can sort of be represented graphically. So, what does this tell you? This tells you that a human, whoops, I don't want to do that. There we go. That a human and a mushroom are more closely related than a human and a plant or a mushroom and a plant. So they would have shared a common ancestor at this point and have now branched from that. And a plant, a human, and a mushroom all shared a common ancestor, but back further. All right, so it just shows you similarities between organisms. They could be similar, but it shows you recent common ancestor. So these two have a more recent common ancestor than these three do. All right, and a plant is more different because these are both heterotrophs and this is an autotroph. All right, so they would share a more recent common ancestor. That's phylogeny. It just shows it. So here's a couple things here. So you can see these are called sister taxa sometimes here. So again, recent common ancestor here. These two would be more similar to each other than B to A or C to A because their recent common ancestor is back a little further. All right, and then a recent common ancestor way back here is shared with A, B, C, D, E, and F. All right, and then a way back, a common ancestor is all of these, A through G. So when you see an out group like this that's by itself, sometimes that's called a basal taxon or an out group. And so if I go back here, my flower in this is my out group. All right, so that's my basal taxon. All right, so just some vocabulary when it talks about phylogeny. All right, so the other thing here is that it shows patterns of descent. It doesn't show similarity. These two things, like my mushroom and my human, are very different from one another. All right, but it shows that they have a more recent common ancestor than my plant does. All right, it doesn't tell you when they evolved or how long they've been evolving. This is not necessarily time. But it's just showing that these had a common ancestor at some point and have now branched off. These A, B, and C have a common ancestor back here. All right, that's all it's showing is common ancestry. Okay. So just to show you an example of one here. So here's an example of a group. My lancelet here, this is an organism, is my out group. And so just to show you, so all of these, lamprey, bass, frog, turtle, leopard, share a vertebral column. So at some point, a common ancestor had a vertebral column that they all evolved from that common ancestor. Now, if I keep going further, this hinged jaw, bass, frog, turtle, and leopard all have a hinged jaw. So that's a shared characteristic that must have come from a common ancestor at some point. All right. And then as we go, so 4 legs, frog, turtle, leopard all have 4 legs. So at some point they had a common ancestor that had 4 legs and they evolved from there. And then these two, turtle and leopard, all have an amniotic sac. All right, so obviously a frog and a bass does not have an amniotic sac. All right, so they must share a more recent ancestor. And then hair is something that only the leopard has. All right, so that's a characteristic that only this species has and none of the other ones did. All right, so if I did something else here, human, I could put a human here because we also have hair. All right, so we must have a common ancestor here that had hair at some point that gave us both hair. All right, but turtle doesn't have hair, so we know that we are more closely related than the turtle and the leopard. All right, because we both have hair and an amniotic sac and 4 walking legs and a hinged jaw and vertebral column. Okay, so that's how we read phylogenetic trees, all right, or phylogeny.